Hello, everybody. Greetings. Welcome to the 2020 International Conference on Educational Innovation and Philosophical Inquiries. I am Syed Nitas Iftekhar. I am the co-founder and director of Kidtopia Children's Museum in Beijing, China. Today, we're going to talk about contestations of global citizenship education in the Global South. Now, this is a dialogue about global citizenship education, or GCE, without getting into the nitty-gritties or the jargon. This dialogue is for those whose voices are represented and not in the global discussion on GCE. So I hope to walk you through it and give you a basic understanding about how global citizenship education looks like in the Global South. And I will also use a specific example from research that was conducted in India. To begin with, innovation in education is now important on a global scale. Ideas related to global citizenship of today have been around for a long time. It started with beliefs, ancient beliefs such as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means world is one family, or Ubuntu, I am who you are, or the Chinese concept of Tianren Hui. I would like to begin with this quote by Tagore, which I really resonate with. Tagore says, "The highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but it makes our life in harmony with all existence." This quote I choose to begin with because it not only resonates with me, but it also coincides with the ideologies of current day global citizenship education. Because today, GCE teaches us to address global issues. It teaches us to address social, political, economic, environmental issues. It is transformative. It has the potential to transform for a better, just society. Global citizenship education is also an emerging discourse of great global significance for peace, diversity, justice, human rights, human dignity, etc. But we have to identify that global citizenship education is indeed a process of globalization. Now that leads to GCE forming contested terrains in different parts of the world. How we see it to how others see it in different parts of the world could be different. That's what we're going to look into today. How this began was actually another perspective that I was presented with after a seminar that I had attended. And one of the scholars came up to me and said, "Why do you mention GCE? We cannot talk of GCE when there are countless number of problems that need to be looked at within India itself. GCE is impractical." Now, this comment led me to conduct research in India, which has been published with Routledge in a book edited by Lauren Miziazek, and it is available online. I'm not going to go into the details of the paper here, but you're most welcome to look it up. You will get a lot of information about GCE related to its practicalness and how in the Global South it can be difficult or not. So when we look at complexities of GCE in the Global South, the first thing that comes to mind is that GCE has been understood to have Western framings of citizenship. This is something that comes from the West to us with global and universal goals. The initial point of conflict is what really global means and how we interpret it. In the Global South, in countries like India, global is being used as a fancy epithet. It's a fancy term that is being used by premier institutions, private or public, to market themselves. Different ideas about what GCE really stands for leads to contested terrains, and the way we use these terminologies, the way we approach GCE, can either empower or disempower individuals in different parts of the world. In the case of India, GCE, the term GCE has been quite neoliberalized. Like I mentioned before, creating global citizens has become an agenda by primary institutions as a selling or a marketing point. This term has been adapted by the elite in the education systems. This is counterproductive to what GCE really stands for. It widens the education equity gap and it defeats the purpose of global citizenship education, because when the elite institutions adapt GCE the way they want to, they try to alienate students from the local issues, which are equally important when we talk about GCE. For instance, in the research, I found out through one of the participants that children from the city of Delhi, two groups of children were asked, how do they see progress or development? One group from the private schools said that progress or development would be when malls would be open 24/7. The other group of students from public schools said that progress would be when each village would have a healthcare center. Now, these are two completely different perspectives coming from one city. How do we see us, ourselves, as global citizens? How do we understand global citizenship is a question to be answered in the global south. In countries like India and in the global south, we are trying to align ourselves in the West, deliberately ignoring local issues in an effort to appear international. It appeals to the people being international. It is what some call the globalization fever that many countries in the South, global South, have gone through. Also, like the education system has many, there's a lot of things that set it back, and implementation of GCE is hampered. For example, a lot of countries in the global South have a highly meritocratic education system. Like Pathak, in the case of India, said, young minds in India are being destroyed by a faulty pattern of education, parental ambitions, the aggression of hyper-competitiveness, and a flawed idea of success. All of this is counterproductive for GCE. Moreover, moving a little away from the education sector, even the political and government ideologies influence global citizenship education a lot. The governments have been ignoring the environment for economic development. There has been so many issues about citizenship in the global south. In India, this is an issue that has been getting more and more attention over the last year or so, but this has been an ongoing challenge. Also, for the case of India, there has been a lot of anti-national or sedition charges for students, teachers, scholars coming out of premier institutions who voice their opinion in a critical way are called anti-nationals. There's also suppression of diversity. Minorities are facing threats on a daily basis in different ways. All of these things make GCE hard and challenge the practicalities of GCE in the context of the global south. There's more about all of this in detail in the reference that I gave you in one of the previous slides. So the government plays an important role. The ideologies about the environment, about the economic development, about diversity, about secularism, all of these play an important role about how GCE shapes up in the global south. I would like to share a quote with you which says, I do not know what it'll take to change the current trend of compromising by giving in to the demands of the extremists who like to silence others, which is empowering the most extremist and the deplorable elements in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's India. But let us begin by talking about this alarming set of affairs, analyzing it, resisting it while we still can. So what we are doing today, this dialogue is meant to initiate or further this dialogue, and we should discuss it, analyze it from different perspectives and lenses, and see how we can make GCE a reality on the global scene. So, like I mentioned a few points earlier, the disempowering elements in the global south could be nationalistic fervor, religious intolerance, misinterpretation of history and diversity, changing of textbooks to elitism in the education sector, to modern articulations of authoritarianism in guise of religious, sectarian, and ethnic fundamentalisms, and ignoring socio-environmental issues in favor of economic or development-oriented agendas. This is common in the global south, though we cannot generalize it or oversimplify all these points. So what do we really need in the global south is we need a democratic and authentic dialogue from different perspectives. We need the perspectives of people who suffer the most. We want to represent the voices equally. We want the minorities. We want people from different backgrounds, different religions, different languages, different educational institutions, where they are able to understand and dialogue through through their own voices and sharing different perspectives. Second thing is that we need to have a understanding of these oppressions bottom up. We need to look beneath the surface. We need to see these realities and question them. There needs to be a continuous critical reading of diverse and extremely large populations in the global south. The last point that I want to discuss is about also connecting eco-pedagogy with critical GCE. A lot of you might not know what eco-pedagogy is. It is a critical pedagogy which provides different lenses to look at socio-environmental issues. It helps us to understand who benefits and who suffers in the different frameworks of globalization or aspects of development. Eco-pedagogy is a Freirean pedagogy, and also Freire's idea of reading the world before reading the word encapsulates the importance of GCE to be used critically within the context of place, with what I mean is global south, by perceiving the social, political, economic contradictions, to take action, to have dialogue against the oppressive elements of reality. So Freire's idea transcends into eco-pedagogy, telling us who is benefiting, who is not, and whose cost. It is also indispensable to understand that the setting, the context, is extremely important towards successful GCE. GCE needs to be adapted to the context of the place, and when we talk about GCE of today, we cannot ignore the problems that the future generations might face. So it is absolutely essential that GCE is critical in nature. It has to keep in mind the local epistemologies, local narratives, local contexts. We need to have a better understanding of the diverse structures and populations, and we need to look at GCE from different lenses. They could be anthropocentric or planetary lenses. Eco-pedagogy, along with critical GCE, offers these solutions. We also need to look at the inequalities, the politically hidden inequalities from local to national to global spheres. If the terminology of GCE is getting into the way, like I had mentioned earlier, it is being used as a fancy epithet. We need to move away from it. The end result is what we strive for. We strive for GCE as a means to address the social, environmental, human injustices that happen. If it needs moving away from the terminology, why not? Because right now, this is what GCE looks like in the global south. globalized citizenship education, one that is contested, convoluted, negotiated, manipulated for various different benefits by different actors. What we need is critical global citizenship education. It is time that we embody ancient beliefs that we have of Ubuntu, Tianren He, or Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam for the good of the planet and all the living beings that inhabit it. The complex and the ever-changing and the challenging nature of GCE is actually an advantage rather than a weakness. It obliges us to look deeper, to look beneath the surface, engage in GCE, to constantly re-examine, re-question perceptions, values, beliefs, and worldviews. It also reminds me, one of the scholars said, when there are these three words, global, citizenship, and education, there can be no research that is complete or finished. This is an ongoing process which we can improve one step at a time. I would like to end with this quote from Tagore. We have for over a century been dragged by prosperous West, behind its chariot, choked by its dust, deafened by the noise, humbled by our own helplessness, and overwhelmed by the speed. We agreed to acknowledge that this chariot ride was progress and that the progress was civilization. If we ever ventured to ask, progress towards what and progress for whom, it was considered to be peculiarly and ridiculously oriental to entertain such doubts about the absoluteness of progress. Of late, a voice has come to take us to count not only of the protection of the chariot, but of the depth of the ditches lying across its path. I would like to end with this. Thank you so much for sharing, giving me the time and listening to this talk, which was an overview. You can look into the research that I have previously done and some of the upcoming research on this topic. And let's initiate this dialogue and let's look at GCE in a critical manner. Thank you so much. My name is Syed Nitas Iftekhar, and it was a pleasure to speak to all of you. Thank you.